I wasn't going to make this public. I was just going to leave it for us. But since obviously the geniuses are starting to cite polls in their favor, I figured I'd show some of the reality of the polls. I'm putting a bunch of stuff out today. But this is the first one. You know, oldies but goodies that have been in private files now going to be coming public, or sitting on another channel or something like that. We start with the Harris poll as interpreted by Axios. Which is what got me to say, okay, it's time, we got to make some actual information public. Best we can now, given we haven't launched yet. Although it's imminent, but it's always imminent, you know. Might as well just get this into the public domain so we can deal with it. I made the following video on May 8th, 2017. It's over 2 years ago. It's now the 21st of May, 2019. Today's May 8th, 2017. We're looking at a video I took a couple of days ago when it was about 40 degrees out from the Westin Hotel. I figured I'd run the video just to show you how empty the buildings looked. The heat's off everywhere. I didn't want to, overdo it showing old stuff, so I picked some old pictures here. These were taken in 2009, 2010. There's empty Boston at the top of the Pro and the Longfellow Bridge. More other directions from the top of the Pro. And that's looking west from the top of the Pro. You can see all the heat's off. Next up is a little photo I took this year in 2019. 22-degree day from the top of the Pro, looking out at the Marriott and the South End. That's the downtown area, taken from Independence Wharf on the bottom, and Post Office Square's Independence Wharf again too. That's looking from the Longfellow Bridge. I took that 2012. That was 2012 coming into the city on the train that day. There's no lights or heat on. No lights or heat on there. It was about 20 degrees out when we came in that day. That's from downtown. You can see I was on the... This is Harbor Towers, a photo I took a couple days ago. This is from 2012. As you can see, all the buildings along the Boston Common are empty. And you got the thin line of pretenders dancing around in front, doing their de minimis walking around in order to prove the buildings are filled when they're not, obviously. Here's Boston in early March, looking downtown. One of those maybe 30-degree days. There were 9-degree days in there too, looked the same. These are the three Avalon Towers looking from the Huntington Avenue Bridge. Goes between the Marriott and the Prudential Center. All kinds of people walk by, nobody ever notices, and they never notice the same buildings from the perspective of the food court there. Here's what I call Boston 2. Those are the mill buildings in Maine. I live in the one on the right there. They all look empty. This is Copley Square. The new buildings are all empty. Same old story everywhere. Okay, we're back to Boston, my hotel room from the other day. Obviously, there's nobody home here. There hasn't been anybody home for years in the area. I've been looking at empty buildings in Boston for most of 17 years. After a couple of years I was in Maine and I didn't come back down. But really the whole place hasn't skipped a beat because there really hasn't been anybody here. They put up some cranes and construction. If you know what the cornerstone system is, you know exactly what that is. I mean, how can everybody on the street be so brain dead, for example? And yet build buildings and file lawsuits and run a court system and argue in the state legislature. What's a congressman in Washington? Why do they bother with presidential elections when it's obvious nobody lives in the building? What we're looking at its base is narcissism. It is built on defending a false narrative, which is the city of Boston filled to capacity. Everybody's a productive worker except for the crazy man, that'd be me. He's crazy for pointing out the buildings are empty looking, even though if you really consider social folkways, you look at the externality of the empty buildings, it's super rude to not point out that they look empty, because you're dealing with a common threat, and the threat being the narrative's wrong. That's really ultimately how people reveal themselves to be the defenders of narrative and the prison guards that they really are. And they're not really smart enough to know what the details are. They obviously controlled from somewhere else. That's a whole set of other topics. What we're interested in is studying narcissism. I wrote the definitive piece on it. It was really a follow-up piece to some work done by Christopher Lasch back in the 1970s. But I wrote the definitive piece in 2013, and I suggest you look at that for reference, because what you're about to see is an example of narcissism that's as stark can be, given the videos that I just showed, and the still photographs. I took this picture in March of 2017, about 2 months ago, right in front of the Westin, which is empty in the background, and the Marriott and the Colonnade hotels, all along empty hotel row. And that's the CNN news crew out looking for snowflakes, because the big story that day was going to be about an upcoming snowstorm. So here they are looking for snowflakes while they're standing in front of all those empty hotels, which is one of the biggest stories of the decade, with me in their presence wanting to talk to them, one of the biggest stories of the decade, and also what the work that we were doing here in counterterrorism, which is one of the biggest stories of the decade. They missed all of the stories. If you notice, a little hard to see, there's a cameraman, there's a reporter, there's the guy with the boom, and there's the coffee guy from the Copley Plaza Hotel over there. It's a doorman bringing these guys coffee in the snow, because that's really a nice thing to do as they're standing out in the cold. The snow was still 2 hours away. They had nothing to do. They refused to talk to me when I passed by, so I went and took their picture. I mean, I call this a gift to Bob. At all those empty buildings, these idiots in front of it, and they're the news media. And they missed 3 big stories of the decade. Nobody wants a scoop, I used to say to the idiots who stand there before. Now I got a picture of it. This is a complex interaction. It's a lot more complex than, I can say right off the cuff. But what I suggest you do is narcissism. If you really want to get into the details, go take a look at the essays that I wrote on narcissism and also on skid-based sociology, and also obeisance if you want to look at that. I thought I'd give you all a treat this morning and show you what it is that CNN expects me to believe on May 8th, 2 months after I took that photograph from Copley Square. To cover up their sins and bury the picture, what they did is they put up a giant chain link fence around Copley Square, reseeded the lawn so that I couldn't possibly, I guess, have been there back 2 months ago before they put the chain link fence up. And they also put scaffolding all up and down Trinity Church. It's just worky crews everywhere. And we already know what that is. That's allegedly proof of people home. You can't see it too well, but there's the chain link fence and there's the scaffolding. I took that picture a day or two ago. I hope you enjoy the following news clips. First, we start off with Susan Collins, who's allegedly my senator from Maine, who has an office a few hundred yards from where I live at the mill. And she obviously has no clue how empty it looks around the area where she has her office. Even a couple of feet away from her office, you can see it. It's really stupid. Then we have Obama in allegedly Boston yesterday, looking super serious and getting some award at the JFK Library. We already know Boston looks empty. Where he was, I have no idea, but it says Boston, and who can argue with that, right? He also looks like he's stoned, by the way. That's been a problem for a couple of years. We've been looking at him and trying to figure out what to do with it when he was the president and what to do with it after he's the president. He really lit the world on fire, is right. I've been dealing with all his friends over the last couple of months, along with about 3,000 other feds here in Boston. The other stories I think I included were one about Russian hacking of the U.S. election with all those people in Boston whose names must have been hacked off a spreadsheet or something. I can't even understand. It's so stupid. De facto, it's stupid, but de jure, it's really stupid too. Then we have the French election stuff, which I saw those pictures of Paris after the Bataclan thing. I'll tell you, it looks like it's flash mob stuff there too. I turned the volume off for you because I figured I'd do you a favor. I could play some music, but I don't know how to do that yet. And these videos are getting a little bit better, but they're still crude because of the way I have to do it. And if anyone thinks I'm a Fox News lover because it's not CNN, let me just point out that they do better with what I call the fake news, which is everything on television, than CNN does. There's more logical consistency within what they do. But they're in my old neighborhood, and they keep showing, moving pictures of 6th Avenue. I worked a couple blocks up from where the Fox News studios are for, I don't know, I think it was 6 years, maybe almost 7. And what can I say? I wrote a piece in November of 2014 about how they blew the entire credibility for having anything in New York, and it was right after that God Almighty decided that they could start really putting their studios on the street, and we'd start backing their hand a little bit better than we were in the past. The essence of narcissism on TV is that if you were to argue with any of these people that their worldviews are stupid, especially when I'm around, you'd run into the notion that if you tell the truth, that's attack, and if you lie, that's defense. So lies are defense. Why is that? What are they defending? The answer turned out to be the narrative. We discovered that a while ago. So if you're defending the false narrative, you're playing defense. If you are saying there's something wrong with the narrative and pointing out basically externalities to people they should be caring about, then you're attacking them. So I'm the most hostile man on the street by moron reverse logic. Without any further ado, enjoy the videos. It's just the topical stuff from the day. I may add a couple more little clips as I go over. And where would we be without commercial interruptions? It's proof of commerce to those who don't understand business at all. And it also provides all kinds of need to cut to the commercial break because we have to earn the money to pay for this show. We have a brand new Sunsetter retractable awning commercial. They had been running the same one from 2007 until last week was the last time I saw it. Probably because I learned what the word cool means, and I've been walking around going, cool kids. In the old ad that they ran for 10 years straight, a couple times a day, there was a nice lady with a nice presentation who'd say, and it's so much cooler. Well, here's what we have now. You ever see those My Pillow ads and wonder how many pillows they actually need to sell in order to pay for these incessant ads that run basically all the time? And never mind the fact that the guy who's the founder of My Pillow looks exactly like a Saco fireman I talked to when they were doing some kind of fire skit back last winter to prove that people were in the building when they weren't. And how about those real people endorsers for, My Pillow and every other product? I'm sure they have lives just like they do in the Saco Mill. What's the difference between a real person and an actor? Don't get me started. I can't answer that now. I can. I finally got stupid enough to figure it out. Still might be a dream, folks, but my dream is to sit around and watch stuff like what you're about to see with Bad Vlad while we're sitting in the Kremlin. That might be a lot of fun. Hollywood's next, folks. What would the news be without Hollywood? The holy word. In the next clip, we see Janice Dean, the weather machine. Don't get me wrong, I wish everybody were as nice in presentation and as articulate as she is about her subject. I'm glad she's back, actually, and if she sees this clip, tell her no offense that she's included in here, but everything's fake news, including the weather. The next video, we have empty Boston at the back of the MIT professor who helped design Obamacare. I mean, it's pretty funny because the city's empty. What's the health care for? And he's the genius from MIT. He's supposed to know this stuff, isn't he? Then after that, we have another take of Obama accepting that award last night in No Doubt Boston. Profiles in courage. Courageously defending the false narrative, I suppose. And for those of you who have never been to Washington, D.C., especially in the old days when the White House used to face in a different direction, the mall faced in a different direction, and when you walked out the front door of the White House, the Washington Monument was a half mile down the road to the right instead of right in front of the White House. I call that Goler House. Wendell Goler was a Fox News reporter back in 2007, and he seemed to need the Washington Monument in front of the White House so that it would look like better photography or something. So there it is, and nobody said a word. Move stuff around all the time. There's one example that makes me laugh every time I see it. Which Washington is this? And in the next clip, evidently somebody knew we're making movies today and forgot to turn the traffic on both 6th Avenue and also, I don't know, what's that, 48th Street, 47th Street? All off.